Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that is, it's both intellectually fascinating and, I think, deeply humbling.
It really is.
We're talking about why smart people, really smart people, believe weird things. We're sort of plunging into the core operating system of the human mind, trying to understand the psychological architecture that makes us masters of reason, but
also, at the same time, so prone to the most spectacular irrationality.
Exactly.
It's the essential human dilemma, isn't it? The sources we're drawing from today mostly centered on the work of Michael Shermer. They paint this picture of human nature caught in a really profound and necessary tension. We're constantly striving for what he calls an exquisite balance.
Okay, let's unpack that right away. What does that exquisite balance actually require from us, cognitively?
Well, it's this balance between extreme vigilance and profound openness. On one side, survival demands that we apply the most skeptical scrutiny to every hypothesis, every single claim we hear.
Right.
If you don't have that skepticism, you just lose the ability to filter. You can't tell a genuinely useful, worthwhile idea from just worthless noise.
You're basically intellectually defenseless, like a sponge that just soaks up everything.
Precisely. But the other extreme, that's just as bad. If you become only skeptical, if you're so rigid that you reject any idea that hasn't been 100% verified,
You become a dogmatist.
you do. You become dogmatic, you stop learning, and you close yourself off from any new, maybe even revolutionary ideas.
So we're caught between being open-minded and being intellectually rigorous. And our sources point way back, centuries even, to capture this tension, using Alexander Pope's description of humanity.
The thinking read. I love that phrase. Pope describes humans as darkly wise and rudely great, reasoning beings who are just inherently prone to error.
Yeah.
We're caught between seeing ourselves as a god or beast. And, the history of humanity is a pretty painful record of what happens when that beast side takes over. We're talking crusades, witch hunts, the Holocaust. Our only real defense against those dark impulses.
The only thing standing in the way.
It has to be consistent, unwavering reason.
Yeah.
And that reason has to be championed by skepticism.
That makes skepticism sound less like a personality trait and more like a fundamental moral duty.
I think it is. It's the vigilance we need to protect not just liberty, but rationality itself in the social sphere.
And this need for vigilance, it hits very close to home for me, actually, from my time as a professional ultramarathon cyclist.
Oh, right.
Yeah, when you're competing in something like the Race Across America, that's 3,000 miles nonstop, and you do that for 10 straight years, pushing your body 22 hours a day.
Yeah.
You become desperate. Truly desperate for any competitive edge.
It's the ultimate high-stakes environment. You're hunting for that 1% advantage.
Exactly. And the whole culture around endurance sports back then, especially in the 90s, was just rife with alternative therapies. I tried everything. Everything. Extreme vegetarian diets, megavitamin dosing, fasting, galvanics, mud bath, iridology, where someone literally reads your iris to diagnose you. Oh, yeah. Rolfing, acupressure. I even slept with this expensive machine, an electroacoscope, that was supposed to rejuvenate my muscles and put me into a restorative alpha state.
And you were pouring money, and I imagine a lot of discomfort into these things based on some pretty extraordinary claims.
It was miserable and expensive.
Yeah.
I remember fasting for a week on this horrifying mix of water, lemon, garlic, and cayenne pepper. The goal was detoxification.
Of course.
I collapsed. Violently ill, halfway up a mountain ride. The electroacoscope just gave me a weird metallic taste in my mouth. Did nothing for my recovery. The negative ion generator I bought to boost energy just coated my walls black with dust.
So the failures were just piling up, but that hope for a magic bullet kept you going.
It did. But the moment of clarity, the thing that really cemented my commitment to scientific skepticism, was when we decided to test cytotoxic blood testing. The theory was it could detect food allergies that supposedly caused your blood platelets to clump, slowing you down. We were already skeptical of the practitioner, so we took one writer's blood sample and submitted it under 5 different names.
A little controlled, if maybe slightly unethical, experiment.
The results were definitive. Every single sample came back with a different, unique set of severe food allergies. One said no peanuts, another said no wheat, another listed garlic.
Wow.
That expensive failure, realizing they were just telling us whatever, with no basis, in fact, it proved to me that nothing worked except consistent training, rest, and a genuinely balanced, science-backed diet. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and they all failed the most basic test.
And that experience perfectly frames the mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore why we're all so susceptible to those expensive, emotionally appealing, but non-scientific claims. We'll be using Shermer's framework to understand the underlying architecture, the cognitive machinery that makes us pattern seekers, and how that system can fail so dramatically.
So let's start at that foundational level, evolutionary psychology. Shermer's argument is that irrational belief isn't because our brains are broken, right? It's that irrationality is a necessary byproduct of a really successful survival mechanism.
That's the key distinction. We shouldn't think of the brain as one single system. It's more like a collection of specialized computational devices, all highly adapted to solve the problems our hunter-gatherer ancestors faced over and over again.
And we all share this basic hardware.
We share this universal, evolved architecture underneath all the layers of culture.
So what was the single most crucial challenge that shaped this architecture?
Pattern recognition and causal thinking. Survival hinged on recognizing patterns. If you saw the pattern that rustling in the tall grass often meant a predator, you survived. If you noticed the pattern that certain berries made you sick, you avoided them. The ones who were good at finding causality and patterns were the ones who passed on their genes.
We are literally the hyper-pattern-seeking children of hyper-pattern-seeking survivors.
Exactly. And this is what drives the whole concept of the domain general belief engine. This engine evolved to form beliefs rapidly based on whatever input and experience it gets. The problem is that this engine is Janus-based.
Meaning it has two faces.
Right. Two outcomes. Under the right conditions, with enough data and some skeptical input, it leads to scientific, critical thinking. But when data is sparse or emotions are running high, it leads directly to magical thinking.
So magical thinking, superstition, seeing ghosts, believing in fate, that isn't a cognitive bug. It's more like a feature of a system running a little too hot.
It's a necessary byproduct, or what evolutionary biologists sometimes call a spandrel. The ability to detect patterns that aren't there is the price we pay for the ability to detect the real life-saving ones. We have superstitions because our brains are fundamentally wired to look for a cause, even when there's only random chance.
And this wiring drives us straight into the world of cognitive errors, especially the two types that Shermer says are central to all of this. These errors determine which of our ancestors made it.
They absolutely did. We are left with this cognitive legacy that's heavily biased because in the ancestral environment, the cost of one type of error was, well, it was basically zero compared to the cost of the other.
Okay, so let's define the less costly error first. The cheap mistake.
That is the type 1 error, a false positive. This is just believing a falsehood. Imagine a primitive human who hears a sound in the trees and thinks it's a predator when it's really just the wind.
Okay.
They run away, they waste maybe 15 seconds of effort, they feel a little foolish, or maybe they believe that doing a specific dance will bring rain.
The cost is low.
Yeah.
A wasted ritual, a minor inconvenience. Maybe it even reduces some anxiety.
Correct. Believing a falsehood, seeing a connection that isn't really there, is often the less expensive mistake in evolutionary terms.
And what about the type 2 error? The really expensive one.
The type 2 error is the false negative. This is rejecting a truth. It means you ignore a genuine pattern. So the same person hears that rustle in the grass, dismisses it as just the wind, but this time it is a predator.
Game over.
Historically, that error led to immediate death.
So the brain that survived and reproduced was the one that was biased toward making type 1 errors. Better safe than sorry. Better to see a false signal than miss a true one.
Absolutely. We have a type 1 error machine sitting on our shoulders, constantly overinterpreting the world. And this bias is incredibly persistent because even today, missing a genuine threat, a type 2 error, can be far more catastrophic than believing some benign falsehood.
But this classification really changes how we should look at modern weird beliefs.
It does. When you look at people who dedicate their lives to believing in UFOs or ghosts or ESP, they're overwhelmingly committing a type 1 error. They're seeing patterns in random noise. They're believing a connection that just isn't supported by evidence. They're following that deep-seated evolutionary command to find a cause for everything.
And type 2 errors, that's about rejecting established reality.
Yes. Our sources specifically use creationists and Holocaust deniers as the main examples of the type 2 error. They are rejecting truth's evolution, the scale and method of the Holocaust that are supported by just overwhelming, convergent empirical evidence.
And that's a crucial distinction. When people commit a type 2 error, it's not because they're just ignorant, is it?
No, not at all. Shermer emphasizes they are often highly intelligent and very well informed, but they are misinformed. Or, more often, their rational brain is being used to eject data that conflicts with a deeply held, usually non-negotiable core belief, like a religious doctrine or an ideological commitment.
So they're using their intelligence to defend a belief they didn't arrive at through intelligence.
Exactly. Which brings us squarely into the territory of cognitive traps.
Right. Because once that belief engine lands on an idea, especially one that's comforting or fits a worldview, the mind just deploys this powerful self-reinforcing arsenal of fallacies. They're designed to make that belief bulletproof.
And the number one protector of any pre-existing belief is the confirmation bias. This is the mechanism we all use to selectively search for, interpret, and remember evidence that confirms what we already think. And at the same time, we ignore, downplay, or just forget any evidence that contradicts it.
It's the intellectual echo chamber we build for ourselves.
Yeah.
And the most compelling, practical example of this has to be the whole phenomenon of cold reading that psychics use.
It's the perfect laboratory for confirmation bias. A skilled cold reader, it doesn't matter if it's Rosemary Altea or John Edward, they don't rely on paranormal powers. They rely on generalized statements, fishing techniques, and the audience's deep need to connect the dots. The medium will ask these incredibly vague questions like, I'm sensing an M sound. Was there a father figure who liked to work with his hands?
And then someone of the audience frantically scans their entire family tree to find their Uncle Mark, who was a carpenter.
Exactly. And the medium gets feedback, a nod, a change in posture, an emotional reaction, and then they zero in on the hits. The most successful cold readers aren't the ones with the most accurate guesses. They're the ones who are best at managing the audience's perception of hits versus misses.
I remember the sources detailing that famous case with the psychic Van Pra, who supposedly reconstructed a murder scene for the police just by touching objects. Everyone hailed it as definitive proof.
That's because everyone there, including the police officers, selectively remembered the successful reconstruction. They forgot that earlier in the session, the victim's grieving mother had made this spontaneous, distraught gesture. She slashed her fingers across her own throat while describing her daughter's last moment.
Oh, wow.
Van Pra, being a very keen observer, picked up on that clear visual cue. The daughter died from a throat wound and then turned it into a psychic hit.
So the audience's job is really to rationalize the psychic's vague output into a specific memorable input for them.
And this behavior is just deeply reinforced by basic psychology. We're talking about operant conditioning on a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, the kind B.F. Skinner studied. It only takes an occasional powerful hit to sustain the belief and the behavior.
Like a slot machine.
Exactly like a slot machine. You keep pulling the lever because that one big payout, no matter how rare, guarantees you'll keep playing. You immediately discard the hundreds of misses from your memory.
Okay, moving on. The pattern-seeking brain often confuses just simple sequence with causation. This feels like a really fundamental error.
It is. That's the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. After this, therefore because of this. It's the engine of all superstition. The baseball player wore the same unwashed socks for the whole playoff series, and the team won, therefore the socks caused the victory. The pattern is clear socks before a win, but the causal link just isn't there.
And I remember the source mentioning how this can even contaminate scientific studies if we aren't super careful about confounding variables.
Absolutely. The study that found that breastfed children had higher IQs is a classic example. The initial conclusion was, wow, there must be something magical in mother's milk. But deeper analysis, accounting for social factors, showed that mothers who breastfeed tend to be older, more educated, and maybe spend more attentive time with their babies.
So it's not the milk.
It might not be the milk. It might be the maternal vigilance or the socioeconomic stability. The milk only preceded the IQ score. It didn't necessarily cause it.
Our terrible grasp of probability just seems to amplify this whole search for meaning. We overinterpret every coincidence.
We struggle so much with statistics. We look for deep, mysterious meaning, synchronicity, as Jung called it, in completely random events. You're driving home, you're thinking about some obscure relative, and the radio suddenly plays their favorite song from 40 years ago. You're astonished. You think, the universe is sending me a message.
But you forget the hundreds of times you thought of that relative and absolutely nothing happened. Or you thought of someone else. Or the radio just played a totally random song.
Coincidence is only remarkable because we fail to see the sheer volume of non-coincidences. Another powerful example is the birthday paradox. The probability that two people in a room of just 23 share a birthday is 50%.
50?
Yeah. In a room of 50, it's 97%. When this happens, people are just floored. They attribute it to fate, because they fundamentally underestimate how probable common events are in large groups.
It's the noise, the background clutter of all the non-events that really determines how we perceive the signal.
Aristotle said it best, "The sum of coincidences equals certainty." But only if you remember to count all the times the coincidences didn't happen.
Okay, let's move to a more aggressive logical trap, one that's often used to defend really fixed ideas. The false dilemma, the either-or fallacy.
This is a tactic of intellectual evasion. It works by forcing an audience into this dichotomy where there are only two options, theory A or theory B. And if you can spend all your time discrediting theory A,
then by default, everyone has to accept theory B.
Exactly. This is the main operational method of ideological movements like creationism.
Right.
Creationists invest most of their intellectual energy attacking evolution, hoping the audience will conclude that if evolution has flaws, which science always accepts as provisional, then creationism must be the true alternative. But that's logically bankrupt. Theory B has to stand on its own positive empirical evidence regardless of the flaws in theory A. There could be alternatives, C, D, E, or F, that we haven't even thought of yet.
And that's related to using a lack of evidence against a claim as evidence for it. The ad ignorantium fallacy.
The appeal to ignorance. The idea that what is unexplained is automatically inexplicable. This is the mistake of saying, well, if you can't definitively prove that Santa Claus does not exist, then he must exist. In paranormal claims, this is huge. It's scientists can't explain this UFO sighting, therefore it has to be an alien spacecraft.
But the absence of proof is not proof of absence.
Or presence. The burden of proof always rests on the person making the extraordinary claim. The scientific method demands positive evidence.
The source illustrates this so well with the case of firewalking. Before we understood the physics, people just assumed it had to be supernatural.
And that assumption, that ad ignorantium, led to all the speculation about the paranormal. Special enzymes, mind over matter, pain-blocking endorphins. But when physicists actually examined it, the explanation was simple. It was mechanical. The secret is the low heat capacity and low thermal conductivity of the wood coals.
Break that down for us.
A piece of metal in a 450-degree oven will instantly burn you because metal has high thermal conductivity. But the air in that same oven, also 450 degrees, won't, because air has low conductivity.
Okay.
Wood coals, even though they're red hot, are mostly carbonized wood and ash. They're light and fluffy. They have very low heat capacity and conductivity, and they don't make great contact with your foot. If you walk quickly, the small amount of heat that's transferred just doesn't have enough time or energy to cause a burn.
The explanation is mundane.
The mystery just vanishes once the physical mechanism is understood.
And all these fallacies, they contribute to what Shermer calls the intellectual attribution bias. This really gets to the core of why smart people believe weird things.
This is what's so fascinating. Intelligence isn't the antidote to irrationality. It's often the servant of irrationality. Smart people don't believe weird things because they lack intelligence. They believe weird things because they're exceptionally skilled at creating these elaborate, bulletproof rationalizations. Complex intellectual defenses for beliefs they arrived at for completely non-smart reasons.
Reasons like emotional comfort, cultural belonging,
tribal identity, or just a simple type 1 error in pattern recognition. Their intelligence is used to justify the conclusion, not to scrutinize it. The human mind is just better at explaining why we believe something than questioning if we should believe it in the first place.
So if the difference isn't intelligence, what is the reliable line? The demarcation line between genuine scientific inquiry and the structured irrationality we call pseudoscience.
The fundamental difference is all in the method and the attitude. Science is defined as a methodology designed to interpret what we observe, and it's aimed at building a testable body of knowledge that's always open to being rejected or confirmed. This acceptance of being wrong, a fallibility, that's the heart of scientific skepticism.
The word provisional is everything here. Science doesn't claim absolute certainty.
No, absolutely not. All scientific facts are provisional agreements. They're subject to challenge, revision, even being completely overthrown if new, better evidence comes along. This ability to self-correct is science's single greatest strength. When a mistake or, worse, a fraud happens, the mechanism of external verification eventually flushes it out.
And the ultimate stress test for that self-correction was the cold fusion fiasco back in 1989.
Oh, yeah. Pons and Fleischmann claimed they'd achieved room temperature nuclear fusion. an incredible world-changing finding. And that extraordinary claim demanded extraordinary evidence. But within weeks, the global scientific community tried to replicate the experiment.
And they couldn't.
They couldn't. The lack of independent external verification, despite this intense professional effort, meant that the initial claim had to be dismissed. It didn't matter how smart the researchers were or how much they wished it were true.
The system of skepticism worked exactly as it was supposed to, because it demands replicability.
It confirmed the fundamental rule. The more extraordinary the claim, the more rigorous and independently tested the evidence has to be.
So, if science is dynamic and cumulative and self-correcting, how does pseudoscience behave in contrast?
Pseudoscience is static. Science is cumulative and progressive. When Einstein's relativity came along, it didn't just throw out Newton. It incorporated and refined Newtonian physics into a bigger framework. Knowledge builds. Pseudoscience, on the other hand, it has no mechanism for accumulating knowledge or correcting its own errors or abandoning failed ideas.
It just keeps them going.
Astrologers today use the same basic principles they used in the 16th century, despite zero empirical success. They perpetuate the failure instead of self-correcting. They defend the core idea no matter what the evidence says against it, which brings us to the ultimate requirement for scientific thought: testability and falsifiability.
This sounds like David Hume's maxim. What was his challenge for extraordinary claims?
Hume asked, "When should you believe a miracle?" His answer was, "Only if the falsehood of the testimony would be more miraculous than the fact it's trying to establish." In practical terms, this means we have to ask of any claim, is it testable? Can it be proven wrong?
If a theory is so vague that no observation could possibly disprove it, then it's useless scientifically.
It is. Take astrology again. We don't need to understand complex gravitational laws. We just need to ask, does it work? Do astrologers accurately and specifically predict major events? When skeptical organizations test them, giving them birth data and asking them to predict things like plane crashes or financial crises, they fail, universally. The theory becomes irrelevant if the claim doesn't materialize.
Speaking of claims that just collapse under scrutiny, let's talk about the 100th monkey phenomenon. That got so popular in the 80s as proof of, like, a collective consciousness.
This is a textbook example of applying skepticism to what is basically folklore dressed up as science. The story claimed that Japanese scientists saw a troop of monkeys on an island learning to wash sweet potatoes. Once, about 100 monkeys, the critical mass, learned the skill, suddenly all monkeys, even on distant islands, started washing potatoes, supposedly through telepathy.
So what did a rigorous review of the original research notes actually find?
The story was completely embellished. First, the sudden acquisition of the behavior actually took 10 years. It wasn't an instant leap. Second, the population of the troop was 59 monkeys and only 36 were washing potatoes when this telepathy supposedly happened, nowhere near 100.
Wow.
And third, the reports of similar behavior on other islands were sporadic, separated by 14 years, and could easily be explained as just independent discovery of a simple survival skill.
So the skeptical conclusion was, quite elegantly, that there was not even a real phenomenon to explain. The story was just a successful piece of scientific myth-making.
It illustrates that the first step of skepticism isn't explaining how something happened, but confirming if it happened at all.
This brings us to a neat philosophical problem, Pirsig's paradox. Robert Pirsig asked whether scientific laws, like the law of gravity, which has no physical mass or energy, are basically just ghosts that exist only in our minds, similar to actual ghosts.
Pirsig was forcing us to consider if gravity existed as a concept before Newton wrote it down. If the scientific law is just a description, is it any more real than a ghost?
So what's the resolution? What separates the law of gravity from the claim of a ghost?
The resolution is that a scientific law is a description in the mind, yes, but it's a description of a regularly repeating action in nature that is open to being rejected or confirmed against external reality.
So the phenomenon itself is independent of our description of it.
Exactly. The phenomenon of gravity existed before Newton. The law of gravity did not. Pseudoscientific claims like ghosts fail this test. They're idiosyncratic. They don't describe regularly repeating actions in nature that are consistently confirmed by external reality. That's the fundamental demarcation line.
Okay, so now let's move from these individual errors to how these flaws scale up into organized belief systems, often with really disastrous social consequences. And let's start with a counterintuitive example, Ayn Rand's objectivism, a philosophy founded entirely on reason.
This is one of the most powerful case studies because objectivism is defined by its core tenets. objective reality, reason, rational self-interest, and capitalism. It theoretically champions individualism and logic above everything else. Yet Shermer shows how it quickly met the sociological criteria for a cult.
How does a philosophy that's built on rationality just self-destruct into a cult?
The failure happened when the absolute veneration of the leader Ayn Rand became more important than the principles of the philosophy itself. First, it demanded unquestioning loyalty and intellectual conformity. Second, it was based on this belief in absolute moral truth, and that truth was dictated solely by Rand. The principles of individualism and skepticism were just canceled out by the social structure.
So the moment Rand became the absolute judge of what reason was, the system stopped being reasonable.
Precisely. The famous fallout with her intellectual heir, Nathaniel Branden, perfectly illustrates this collapse. When Rand discovered his affair, she just denounced him with this furious absolutism, screaming that she would destroy him as I created him. The reaction was entirely emotional, not rational at all.
And the followers rationalized this emotional tyranny using their highly trained intellects.
They did. Our sources cite this horrifying example. A half-demented follower actually published an article analyzing whether it would be morally legitimate to assassinate Branden. And he concluded, based on objectivist principles of self-defense against intellectual harm, that it would be morally justified. A philosophy meant to celebrate intellectual liberty instead produced moral absolutism and total intolerance of any dissent.
Okay, moving to a more widespread, type 2 error-rejecting established truth. Let's revisit creationism, an ideological commitment against overwhelming empirical evidence.
The core issue here is the starting position. The creationist argument isn't that the evidence suggests a young Earth, but that the Bible is inerrant, and therefore, no geological difficulties, real or imagined, can be allowed to take precedence over the clear statements and necessary inferences of Scripture.
The conclusion is fixed from the start.
It's fixed, and then evidence is just cherry-picked or rationalized to defend it.
And the attempt to get this doctrine into public science classes required 3 different legal strategies over the decades.
The first, which we saw with the 1925 Scopes trial, was just the outright prohibition of teaching evolution. That largely failed legally, but it did effectively scare textbook publishers for generations. When that was ruled unconstitutional, the strategy shifted in the 70s and 80s to demanding equal time for creation science, arguing it was an alternative scientific theory.
Which was defeated in the Supreme Court case Edwards v. Aguillard.
Yes. The court rightly determined that creation science was religious dogma, not testable, falsifiable science. So the final strategy, which emerged in the 2000s, was intelligent design, ID. It avoids mentioning God or the Bible, but argues that life is too complex, reducibly complex, to have arisen naturally, which implies a designer.
And that, too, was defeated in the Kitzmiller trial, where the court used the standard of falsifiability to determine that ID was not science. It was just theology in a lab coat.
And the creationist attack is fundamentally pseudoscientific because it doesn't just attack biology. It has to attack the core evidence of all modern sciences: geology, physics, astronomy. If the Earth is only 6,300 years old, then physics has to be wrong about radioactive decay, astronomy has to be wrong about the speed of light, and geology has to be wrong about stratification.
Let's talk about that specific failure in their math, like the population growth argument.
Right. Creationists often argue that, based on current global population growth rates, if you extrapolate backward, it proves the Earth must be young. They claim we get to the biblical number of about 600 people only 6,300 years ago, but this relies on assuming a steady, predictable growth rate.
Which history completely contradicts.
Violently contradicts. If you accept their model, then around 2600 BCE, when these huge monumental civilizations existed in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley civilizations that required massive organized labor, the entire global population would have been about 600 people.
You can't build the pyramids with 100 people.
You can't. The historical record of these stable, flourishing civilizations during that period just completely defeats their population model.
Okay, next let's explore mass delusion. Moving from ideological commitment to social panic, using the historical witch crazes as a framework.
Witch crazes, whether they were medieval or modern, are classic examples of social follies. They're driven by feedback loops where a closed social system cycles information, and the outputs, new accusations, new stories, feed back into the inputs, accelerating the hysteria until it reaches this critical, destructive mass.
What are the consistent parts of these loops?
Historically, they focus on marginalized groups, usually women, and they typically involve sexual themes. But the most frightening component, the thing that fuels the loop, is that denial of guilt is seen as proof of guilt. Once an accusation is launched, others appear, reinforcing the first idea, and it becomes dangerous for anyone to dissent.
And this pattern found a modern, terrifying parallel in the recovered memory movement of the 1990s.
A direct, frightening parallel. Therapists, who were influenced by some really flawed literature, use suggestive techniques, hypnosis, guided imagery, dream work to search for evidence of childhood sexual abuse, even when the client had no memory of it. The client would then often read books about recovered memory and go to support groups.
The feedback loop takes hold.
It does. The suggestion from the therapist became the input for the support group, which reinforced the memory, which then confirmed the therapist's initial belief. False memories weren't just recovered, they were created and then deeply reinforced by this social system.
And the outcome was devastating. It led to destroyed families and serious judicial errors, like the Franklin Lipsker case.
George Franklin was convicted of murder based entirely on his daughter's sudden recovered memory 20 years after the event. Only later did investigators realize that her memory may have incorporated details from old newspaper articles, and that she and her sister had been subjected to hypnosis to enhance their memories. The whole movement shared how suggestibility, combined with a powerful feedback loop, can generate data that's taken as undeniable truth, completely shattering people's lives.
The same cognitive mechanism seems to apply to the phenomenon of alien abductions, which are surprisingly consistent in their descriptions around the world.
Proponents use that consistency, the short, large-eyed gray aliens, the metallic tables, the sexual probes, as proof that it's real. But the consistency actually points to a cultural origin, not an extraterrestrial one. Today's abductees aren't just accessing independent memories, they're reading the same books, watching the same TV shows, and crucially, consulting the same specialized regression hypnotists.
So the narrative provides the lens through which these culturally driven hallucinations are interpreted. We're interpreting altered states of consciousness like sleep paralysis through the dominant cultural script.
And that script changes. In the 1950s, people reported meeting benevolent, tall, fair-haired aliens from Venus. After the Betty and Barney Hill case and the books that followed, the narrative shifted entirely to the smaller, cold, gray, analytical aliens. The phenomenon adapts to the cultural narrative, not to independent observation.
And the evidence put forward is almost universally weak, like the infamous 1995 Roswell autopsy film.
The debunking of that film is a fantastic exercise in convergence of evidence versus pseudo-historical fabrication. There were multiple independent lines of failure for the claim that this was legitimate 1947 government footage.
What were the key specific factual failures?
First, the alleged alien matched the look that was created in a 1975 movie, not the 1947 eyewitness accounts of the crash. Second, the government's supposed response, burying the bodies, was historically implausible. Any government would have extensively studied the most important biological discovery in history, not just quietly disposed of it.
Right.
And third, forensic analysis showed the autopsy procedure was totally non-medical. Pathologists noted the man operating the scalpel handled the organs like a tailor using scissors.
And the definitive debunking, I remember, even involved a specific medical condition.
Yes. A German surgeon identified the distinct physical features of the alien, the extreme hydrocephalic head, the widespread eyes, the underdeveloped jaw, as perfectly matching a human infant suffering from Opitz trigonocephaly syndrome, or C syndrome. The evidence was just overwhelming. It was a fabricated hoax, likely using a sophisticated mannequin, designed to exploit our pattern recognition.
Finally, we have to look at the methodology of Holocaust denial, which is a form of pseudo-history.
Deniers typically don't deny that Jews were persecuted. Their denial focuses specifically on the intentionality of the genocide, the use of industrial gas chambers, and the number of victims, which was 5 to 6 million.
And their methodology mirrors pseudoscientists in how they focus on minor errors.
Exactly. They zero in on weak points or minor inaccuracies made by historians. For instance, a historical error about the precise ventilation in one gas chamber, and then they claim that because a small detail is wrong, the entire conclusion of genocide must be false. They select data and ignore the mountains of contradictory evidence.
So how does an impartial historian or a skeptic fight back against that selective rationalization?
By relying on the convergence of evidence. Holocaust denial can't be disproven by one piece of paper. It's disproven by the convergence of dozens of independent lines of evidence, captured German blueprints for the crematoria and gas chambers, confessions from SS guards and camp administrators, detailed accounts from the Jewish Sonderkommando who actually operated the gas chambers.
So many sources.
Extensive records from companies like IG Farben supplying Zyklon B, aerial reconnaissance photographs. The deniers have to rationalize away literally hundreds of independent data points, claiming coercion, fabrication, or intentional error. And this reliance on convergence is what separates verifiable history from pseudo-history. Facts are established when multiple independent data streams all point to the same conclusion.
So we come back to the core paradox. If intelligence isn't the cure, why do educated, rational, highly intelligent people keep falling for these sophisticated rationalizations?
Well, we established that intelligence is often orthogonal. It's just unrelated to belief in weird things. High intelligence tends to be domain-specific. A brilliant neurosurgeon is no more likely to detect a financial scam than a layperson because their intelligence is leveraged exclusively within their field.
And their very brilliance can sometimes make them more vulnerable to certain cognitive traps.
Magicians exploit this perfectly. Highly intelligent people approach a trick, assuming they need to figure out the complex, hidden logic. Because they're focusing so intensely on the complicated solution, they entirely miss the simplest misdirection, the sudden movement, the verbal cue. Their intelligence is used to complicate the problem, which allows the trickster to succeed simply.
And the power of the confirmation bias operates even at the highest levels of science, as we saw with the test of Einstein's relativity.
Eddington's 1919 experiment was meant to be the ultimate impartial test. He measured the deflection of starlight during an eclipse, and he confirmed Einstein's theory. But later historical analysis revealed that the measurement error in Eddington's data was actually as large as the effect he was measuring.
Meaning he basically confirmed what he hoped he would confirm.
He was part of a circle of mutual confirmation. His observations confirmed Einstein's math, and the acceptance of the math justified the validity of his data. Now, this doesn't mean Einstein was wrong later. Better measurements confirm the theory. But it shows that even giants of physics can be subtly swayed by the desire to confirm a beautiful theory they already support.
This leads us to maybe the most complex case study in intellectual rationalization. The brilliant cosmologist Frank Tipler and his highly mathematical defense of God and immortality.
Frank Tipler is a leading expert in global general relativity, yet he dedicated himself to writing The Physics of Immortality, claiming to use 122 pages of pure math and physics to prove that God exists and that humanity will be resurrected in a universal supercomputer simulation at the end of time. He calls it the Omega Point Theory, OPT.
A completely rational, complex, mathematical defense of what is, at its heart, a faith-based wish.
And that's the profound danger. Tipler avoids mysticism. He uses the language of theoretical physics to establish a desired conclusion. But what should immediately raise the skeptical flag is that the theory perfectly fulfills our deepest, most primal wishes. The end of death, the continuation of consciousness, cosmic purpose.
So is the fundamental logical failure that he assumes the conclusion and then reasons backward from it?
That is the simplest way to understand how the mathematical logic gets corrupted. Tipler establishes the omega point, the existence of this all-powerful intelligence, as a necessary boundary condition for the universe to exist in the way he describes it. He then reasons backward, using physics to justify the boundary condition he has already assumed to be true. He's treating the desired endpoint as a variable he has to justify, not a phenomenon he has to observe.
And this intellectual acrobatics, whether it's in objectivism or creationism or Tipler's OPT, it seems to be rooted in the same psychological need.
The need to defeat contingency. The world is quirky, it's messy, it's fundamentally contingent, just a series of events happening without some inherent design or purpose. Tipler's OPT, just like Paley's watchmaker argument centuries ago, is ultimately an attempt to impose order, design, and absolute certainty onto a reality that is often random. It's the desire to prove this is not just the best of all possible worlds, but the only possible world. It's sacrificing empirical reality for the comfort of certainty. That's right. And the ultimate battle, then, is against our own psychological wiring that defaults to certainty and purpose. Skepticism is the continuous, vigilant process of checking our default settings.
Okay, so this deep dive has really exposed the mechanics of our belief engine and shown that intelligence offers no immunity from irrationality. Skepticism isn't a position, it's a discipline.
So for you, the listener, here are 4 actionable ways to strengthen your critical thinking skills against this flood of misinformation and motivated reasoning.
Takeaway number 1, demand testability. This is the rule of evidence.
Base your conclusions on positive empirical evidence, not on the failure of others to disprove a claim. If a theory cannot, in principle, be rejected or confirmed by observation or experiment, if it's immune to falsification, it is not science. Never fall for the ad ignorantium fallacy.
Takeaway number 2, beware of the double standard, or the beam in your own eye.
Use your critical intelligence not just to attack the claims of others, but to actively seek evidence that contradicts your own strongly held beliefs. We have to apply rigorous scrutiny to our own assumptions first. You need to use your intelligence to critique, not just defend, your conclusions.
Takeaway 3, understand convergence. There is no single proof.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Facts, whether they're historical or scientific, are established not by single isolated testimonies or blurry photographs, but by the convergence of multiple, independent, and verifiable lines of evidence that all point to the same conclusion.
And finally, takeaway number 4, embrace provisional truth.
Recognize that scientific facts are temporary agreements, a temporary map of reality that's always subject to revision. The goal is not to reach some final, unchangeable destination of absolute certainty, which is often the appeal of pseudoscience. The goal is to continuously refine your understanding. The intellectual journey, the process of rigorous inquiry, it matters more than the destination of absolute certainty.
It's a fantastic summary.
By maintaining this constant tension, that exquisite balance between openness to new ideas and skeptical scrutiny, you protect your reason from the evolutionary default toward pattern, purpose, and comforting certainty.
A crucial and enduring lesson. Thank you for guiding us through this really challenging deep dive into the belief engine.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.